You would think that something having to do with Mars would be red. Well, Colorverse is taking that thought and saying, screw it boys, we're going green. So unless you've been living under a rock the last few decades, or are a diehard Venus fan and don't care about the rest of Sol system, then you know Spirit was an active explorer of the Red Planet from 2004 to 2010. As I said in the cold open though, instead of commemorating this rover with a red ink, Colorverse instead chose to go with a very unapologetic green. The logic for this color decision, nor the choice of purple for its twin Opportunity, well, that's not listed on the website, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that Colorverse went this route because, well, let's be honest here, a 10-bottle red, brown, and yellow season of inks probably would not have sold well. If we ignore my inner cynic, it could also potentially be a play on the primary mission being to seek out life where no man has yet to go. Unless Elon has his way, that is. Anyways, I will say this though, of the two colors in the set, I'm actually glad that I haven't tried Opportunity yet. I mean, I'm a green ink person, purple's not really my thing. But let's go through the KPIs and see if this ink is one worth keeping on the shelf. First up is the ink blot. You'll see a little later in the writing portion of the review, but for the most part, this ink likes to stay in the middle tones out of a broad nib. And, I mean, they are some nice mids at that. Overall, I'm getting a pine and sea green feeling with hints of Sacramento green coming through in the undertones. And as you transition into the darker mids and over into those transition tones, the Sacramento green becomes more prevalent, and the undertones now are kind of taken over by a smooth forest green, if that makes any sense. Once you hit those transitions though, you are greeted with a nice bold sheen, and I don't know, I mean, you're not really going to get that out of a nib. It's, under normal writing, you're just going to be seeing those darker mids at the darkest. You've got to dump the ink on the page to really get that sheen to come through. But otherwise, I'm going to call this one a win. Moving on to the dry times though, this is kind of a letdown, and if you're looking for an ink that is sub 30 seconds out of a wet pen or a bold nib, then keep this one off of Tomoe. That said, Rhodia performance is only slightly better than the 30-second cutoff, drying at just under 25 seconds. It's not a complete deal breaker, but this is definitely not the green ink for people that need to write multiple pages in a quick setting. I'm looking at you college students. Like, seriously, some of you do need to be taking notes, preferably with a pen, so you actually remember the notes you took. You know the ones I'm talking to. Moving along from that though, the water test, I mean, it's not going to be doing this ink any favors, but it does show one of the benefits of filming at 6K. As we look through the water and onto the page itself, we get a really good look at the blue portions of the ink lifting from the page. Since the color lift is pretty much all blue in nature, there is no surprise for me that we are, just getting a yellow-green underlayer. And I will be honest here, it is at least quite easy to recover, and okay, yeah, so for water performance, it's kind of a letdown, but it's passable. Before we move on to the writing sample though, let's talk dogs. Why dogs, you ask? Well, simply put, if you want to support the Dog Treat and Dog Toy Fund, then you should really consider becoming a patron. For $2 a month or more, you can clear your conscience and give back to the two pups that give up their owner time so they can watch me make these videos for you. Speaking of which, let's get to the writing samples. This week, we are starting over on Tomoe. First impression with this ink is that if you are writing in print, then you are going to have an experience that likes to stay towards the darker mids. Unlike a few of the other inks that I've used, this ink does seem a little more susceptible to skipping if there are areas of the paper where oils or other residues have built up on the page. It isn't a deal breaker, but it is something to be kept in mind as you use this ink. Looking at formal script, the dynamic range opens up a little to include more of the true mids, and it also opens up more of the sea green undertones of the ink. Most importantly though, this ink is plenty wet, and in Colorverse tradition, it is fairly well lubricated. The cap off test saw this pen being able to go 4 hours uncapped without a hard start. Not that I would recommend that, but it is always something of note should you be pulled away from what you were writing before you can cap the pen. Moving on over to Rhodia, print writing shows much of the same, if not bolder. This is what I was talking about when I said good luck getting any sheen. I'm a slow writer with a broad nib in a wet pen, and there is no sheen to be found. Maybe if you had a flex or triple stack nib that would change things, but I'm just not seeing the sheen coming out here. One other key difference on Rhodia when compared to Tomoe is that we also see a slightly more narrow line width with this pen and paper combination without sacrificing the darker tones. If anything, this ink comes out darker over here on Rhodia than it does over on Tomoe. Once again, that puts me in a tough situation though. I am a Tomoe fanboy, and I find myself liking this ink more on Rhodia. So if you like darker green tones and the dynamics on display, and don't mind a slower dry time, and can keep oils and residue under control on the paper, okay, then maybe this ink is for you. As for me, the jury's still out, but it feels like it may be a pass. And that's going to do it for our look at Colorverse Spirit. If you like that review or found it useful, hit the thumbs up, get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Nice mids, at least. Stick to the script, that's why you wrote it. Stick to the script, that's why it's there.